Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. June is the start of Pride Month, and Indy Pride was planning on celebrating virtually this month due to the pandemic. After the events in the last few weeks and the protests following the death of George Floyd, Indy Pride announced the cancellation of all events except for the virtual festival. This is in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. Chris Handberg, Executive Director of Indy Pride, and Tiffany Hanson, Director of Marketing and Communications for Indy Pride, joined me to talk about the changes that are happening this year and how the decision was made. Chris starts by talking about the history of Pride Month.
Well, the LGBTQ liberation movement, started over 50 years ago, and the Stonewall riots are sort of the focal point that history books point to as the moment that it caught fire across the country and got national recognition. But there were lots and lots of protests prior to Stonewall. But at the Stonewall, the police were raiding, seizing, and harassing the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender folks that were going to this establishment, and they had enough. So they fought back against the police and they rioted for 6 days. It was not a peaceful protest. It was smoke and fire and looting and a lot of the things that we see today. And that's what really started the conversation nationally about LGBTQ rights. And so we honor and celebrate June as that because of the Stonewall riots, even though there were movements and protests prior to Stonewall.
And locally, and with the pandemic that hit this year, early on, Indy Pride went ahead and moved all of the events for Pride Month. Even though it was in March, you guys announced that you wanted to move everything digitally.
In March, when the pandemic started, we were all had the same response that most of the country did. First couple of weeks, it was shock. Let's just wait and see. I can't believe that this is happening. Then it was, well, let's try to reschedule for August. So we secured dates for August. Then we secured alternate dates for November. And then we realized that there wasn't really an end in sight, and we didn't feel comfortable having a 50,000 person festival at any time with the pandemic going on. So we moved to virtual. Our volunteer team, our staff has worked really, really hard to try to make meaningful virtual experiences that the community can celebrate. And we've had a few and had around 2,500 to 3,000 people participate, which is exceptional for us. And we're really happy with that. However, we have moved into a time where our energy as a community, as individuals, needs to really be focused on uplifting the Black Lives Matter movement, the voices of Black and Brown people, and to really protest the police brutality that we've all witnessed for years, but really has come to light in the past couple of weeks, couple of months.
And so now on Thursday, you announced that all the events that were planned virtually have been canceled.
The only event that we're keeping is our virtual festival on June 20th, which will be from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that will exclusively highlight Brown and Black voices, artists. We will talk about activism. We will listen to some talented folks. We'll have different demonstrations and showcasing those parts of our community that are traditionally not lifted up.
Tiffany, would you like to add on anything at this point?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to note that as a team, whether that's our staff or as our board, we have a lot of internal discussions before we make decisions. We reach out to a lot of community stakeholders before we make any decisions or any big statements. The big statements that we put out are not something that we take lightly. It's not something that we draft up in 10 minutes and pop out there. So we really do take feedback from our entire community very seriously, whether that was the shift to virtual rather than in person or the statement that we made this morning. It is something that I think we're always going to have differing opinions on anything that the organization does because we do have such a large and diverse community. But as a team, we try really hard to take all of the feedback from our community as a whole before we make any decisions that affect the way that we operate.
So the LGBTQ community is also connected with the communities of color. And by uniting together, What can people do to support Indy Pride and Black Lives Matter right now?
So what people can do to support Indy Pride and Black Lives Matter is actually we included some suggestions in the statement we put out this morning that are very specific. We provided links to organizations that folks can support, including Indy 10 Black Lives Matter, a Surge, which is showing up for racial justice, the Bail Project, which helps to bail out protesters if they've been arrested, in addition to statements like intentionally supporting Black and brown business owners, intentionally supporting Black and brown artists, making sure that you're educating yourself rather than relying on our own Black and brown community members to educate us about prejudice and racial discrimination. So we've made those statements and we included those suggestions in that statement for folks to reference and to find some helpful links.
I definitely want to highlight and underscore that this is a time to support those organizations that are lifting up Black Lives Matter, that those organizations directly need to be supported. Indy Pride, the support we want you to give us is to support them.
And where can people read your statement and see this list?
It's on our website under Pride Voices. It's on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. It's on Channel 6. So I think everyone's gotten the message, and we're certainly receiving lots of different types of feedback.
We also sent it out, the full statement, in a mass email to our full emailing list, which includes tens of thousands of people across the state. So it was really important for us to put this in every place possible because we want it to be very clear, the statement that we're making and how important it is.
Also, in the message that you pushed out, you're also including that in future festivals and events, you've decided not to use the IMPD and use private contractors where it is you are able to, because IMPD has to be used for road closures. How did you make this decision?
So I would say the statement says that we won't utilize contract services with police departments. And so IMPD is obviously the biggest one and in the city, but also other departments in surrounding counties we will not use as well. We have had this discussion about the presence of uniformed police officers at Pride since I've been part of Indy Pride, which has been about 3 years. There have been lots of people in our community, mostly queer people, mostly communities of color, that have said this does not make us feel safe to have a uniformed officer there because we experience harassment, brutality, and sometimes we are killed by police officers. And sadly, it has taken us this long to take those voices seriously, but now we have. And it is clear the way that the protesters have been treated by IMPD that they were right, that they are experiencing police brutality, that they are experiencing harassment, that they are being killed. And so we thought it was the right time to make a bold stance, to show our support, to not just put out a statement that's saying we stand with you, but to make a meaningful change to our organization that hopefully will make people feel more welcome, will make people feel more accepted. The struggle that we had and the conversation that we had was about security in general, because if we're not using law enforcement, what happens if a worst case scenario where we are the target of a group that is intent on doing us harm? And we are working on contingency plans with that. We will still have a relationship with law enforcement to help us identify those targets and those threats. But we really did feel that the larger good of making sure that our community feels safe at our festival, which is supposed to be a celebration of them, was paramount. And so we can do lots of things at the park to make it safe that are fairly passive. And we can also utilize private security contractors to make sure that our attendees are safe in cases of crowd control, medical needs, what have you.
And I would like to just add, coming back to the statement that I made earlier, that all of these decisions have been as a result of conversations with community stakeholders and leadership on all sides of the table. Chris has had a number of important conversations and has actually done training for IMPD. We're working hard with police departments to try to improve things. And we're also working with the community to try to respect what they're asking us to do. So I think it's important for us to say that this isn't one-sided. This is definitely lots and lots of conversations and meaningful work to try to make a change in every way that we can. And that's where we've kind of fallen today.
I would say that personally, my heart hurts for the LGBTQ officers. And a little bit of my background is I spent 10 years with IMPD as an outreach advocate for the Julian Center. And I would work with officers and go on scenes to do crisis intervention with those that experience violence. And so I know that there are individual good officers. And I know that there are LGBTQ officers that really do face discrimination and harassment for being LGBTQ and having the job that they have. And I am very, very sorry that their feelings might be hurt. But we really do need them to advocate and to be a bridge and to explain to their superiors and leadership why this has come about. That we have had this conversation about police brutality. We have made requests for years and nothing has happened. And so we don't have the power to change an internal system. We just have the power to say we can't do this anymore and hope that those on the inside can change the internal system. And so we absolutely love and appreciate the individual officers that are part of our community and those that have served our community. But quite frankly, when we saw a peaceful protest on Sunday that were engaged in prayer, get tear gassed, that to me is the most clear example as to why we have to make this statement, because it demonstrates and illustrates the brutality that Black Lives Matter and people of color have been screaming about for years and that we have not listened to. And for that, I am personally sorry, and we promise that we will do better.
For anybody in law enforcement who would like to know how to start that conversation within their own department, would you be able to give them guidance if they reached out to Indy Pride?
Absolutely. And in my conversation with Chief Taylor about this move and a couple of other issues, before the statement was released, we talked about getting together, and we are working with the Black Lives Matter movement because we feel that the current need is for their voices to be heard. And Indy 10 Black Lives Matter said that they would meet with Chief Taylor if they released the name of the officer that shot and killed Drayshawn Reed and released the autopsy. And when those conditions were met, then we could have a conversation about healing. But we are taking the lead from Indy 10 Black Lives Matter, and we will stand with them.
For future festivals, when it comes to people who are in law enforcement, who are LGBTQ, they're still invited to come to the festivals. It's still open to them, correct?
It is absolutely 100% open to them. We respectfully ask that they do not wear their uniform because the uniform itself is a symbol of oppression for a lot of folks. And that's something that causes fear. And I am a white cisgender gay man, and I worked with IMPD for years. And so for me, I do not have that same response, and I don't have to understand it to respect it and to listen and to act on it. And so that is why we are taking the stand that please don't wear your uniform. We don't know what we're going to do if someone shows up, except have a conversation with them as to why that they chose to do that, and then try to de-escalate a situation from there. But I hope that people will respect it. And I hope that LGBTQ officers will know that we still value and love them as part of our community.
Tiffany, do you have anything you'd like to add?
In the statement that we made this morning, we did include that sentiment that Chris just explained of we do recognize that there are many law enforcement professionals who are in our community. We very explicitly stated that they're welcome at our events and they're still part of our community. And again, use the exact same words. We respectfully request that you do not wear your uniform at the Indy Pride Festival or other events. So again, trying to be as clear as possible in our communications and what we'd like to see to ensure that all of our community members feel safe in the future.
And then kind of shifting gears, scholarships are open with Indy Pride right now, right?
That's correct.
And there's been a new scholarship that's been added. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think in the midst, our larger conversation today has all been about supporting the community and listening to the community and finding ways to support different demographics within our community. And Indy Pride has very much so had a long-standing scholarship program where we support the students that are in our community, both graduating seniors as well as students who are already taking classes. Over the past 2 years, we've awarded over $37,000 worth of scholarships to students in our community, which we're really proud of. The scholarship program is open right now. So we do have several different scholarships available. The brand new addition that we're excited about is the Carrie Thomas Memorial Athletics Scholarship. So Carrie Thomas was a leader with our Circle City Indy Pride Softball League for many, many years. He tragically passed away recently. And so we're delighted to be able to showcase Carrie's contributions to the community and showcase Circle City Indy Pride Softball's contributions and their commitment to provide a scholarship every year for the foreseeable future in Carrie's name. And so it's just a really incredible way to see part of our community really rallying together to support another part of our community and to support the future of LGBTQ students and professionals.
And as we wrap up, is there anything either of you would like to add?
We really want everyone to stay safe and healthy. We want everyone to express their voices, and we really want folks to listen to people of color, to brown and black folks, to our community, uplift those voices, and help create the change that we so desperately need.
And I think when we talked about the history of Pride, I love that we started with that. The history of Pride and the Stonewall riots were really about people from all facets of the community coming together to support one another. And I think centering that as all community members, reaching out to all of our Indy Pride family members to see if they're doing okay, to see if they need any support, to see if there's anything you can do to help. I think that's really important right now and is at the essence of Pride Month, is that connection. And so I think that despite the pandemic, despite the cultural climate, I think that is one thing that literally every single person can do, is maybe pick one person every day to reach out to see how they're doing and to see how you might be able to support them.
For the second part of the show, I spoke earlier this week with Bob Schultz, Senior VP of Marketing and Events for Downtown Indy. We talked about how downtown has been working to help businesses during the pandemic and following the events of last week. Bob first explains what Downtown Indy does.
Yes, we are the urban place managers for downtown. If you think about the world of civic promotion and management organizations, from Visit Indy and the Chamber and Arts Council, Sports Corp, our focus as a private nonprofit organization is to be to keep our foot on the gas pedal for downtown. We're a small nonprofit. We're made up of members who are business owners, property owners, business leaders, civic leaders, community organizers, sports teams, attractions, hotels. You get the idea. The entire breadth and depth of downtown. We collectively believe that we have to focus on downtown as an economic driver for the community, as well as a place for livability and vitality for all of Indianapolis. So our focus is obviously hyper-local, kind of a 2-mile radius emanating out of Monument Circle, but again, its focus is to benefit the entire community.
And with what Downtown Indy is and what it does, through your website, you have all the different neighborhoods, you have different events, but because of the pandemic we are in, we're not having any of those events. This is
something that we often think about across the community. When do we go downtown? Well, 157,000 people come to work usually every day downtown. Clearly, that hasn't been happening since the middle of March. We think about 23 to 33 million visitors coming to Indianapolis, many of whom visit downtown, go to events, sporting events, conventions, and otherwise. That's not happening right now. We think about the about 30,000 people who live downtown. That is still happening And as downtown starts to reopen, those events, those activities, those opportunities to engage with each other and go to restaurants and enjoy the kind of the culture of downtown is slowly starting to return. So as far as the number of events, yes, it's been a very quiet last few months, as it has been across our nation and world. Yet we still are trying to manage this space, make it as clean and safe as ever for the great return, which will slowly start to trickle now moving forward.
And with the pandemic, what steps has Downtown Indy done to help local and small businesses?
So if you think about the pandemic, everybody just basically folded up shop and took it home and worked from home. Most people, there were still a number of essential workers who, including some of our own team, who continue to come to work each day, power wash, clean, spruce up downtown. I think all of us want, when we do return to work from the safety of our homes, that we're approaching a safe and clean space. And so we're going to see that, obviously, in a sanitized way in workplaces and such as that workforce returns to downtown. But it's also a matter of the vibrancy of downtown. You think of kind of the heartbeat of a community. So much happens downtown in an average year, from the big events, parades and football games, Circle of Lights, others. And so that vibrancy now is being... that light has dimmed, obviously, during the pandemic, and then in more recent days during some of the violent activity that followed some of these great peaceful protests that, again, we gather together in our downtown to participate in. And so that our focus has been around, and always has been around, clean, safe, beautiful, vibrant, economic driver. All of those things continue, and we try to find as many opportunities to stimulate those areas as possible.
And following this past week and some days with the protest and then what followed after, what is Downtown Indy doing to help those local businesses who have received damage or some of the graffiti that was left behind?
Well, first and foremost, when we think about the events of these last few days where so many in our community have come to have their voices heard, to speak out against injustice, to speak out against inequalities, that's not new language. We're just hearing it in a much more profound way these more recent days, not only in our own community, but across our nation and actually in many parts of our world. But specifically, some of that, some bad apples in the mix continued it beyond just their voices and tried to capitalize on this opportunity to wreak havoc. And they are different than our protesters. We welcome that protest message and that statement, and we always have. I think over the years, Monument Circle has been that place where we first gather to celebrate, to mourn, to challenge, and most recently to speak out. And as we all know, the downtown businesses became the victim to violence that was not necessarily associated with the protests and anger that had welled up, and then some who just took advantage of that to cause damage, greater damage, and criminal activity. And that's not welcome, and it has hurt our businesses, many of whom were just starting to prepare to reopen, to welcome their staff back, their employees, to open their doors to downtown residents and visitors from across our city. And that is a huge now cause for pause in our community. It looks like if you haven't been damaged, it looks like you're boarding up for an approaching hurricane. And that's unfortunate. That's not the type of downtown we are. We want to be open. We want to be receiving of friends and relatives and visitors all around our community, not just from out of town, but from all throughout our community. And so we've been trying to go door to door to these businesses. What are your needs? How can we help? How can we support you? How can we encourage those who continue to come down to protest? Are there opportunities for them to embrace some of these businesses, to dine at them or to patronize them? And that's where a lot of our focus has been.
And for people who want to support Downtown Indy, how can they do that?
So, again, Downtown Indy, Inc. is a membership-based organization, and they're made up of businesses and civic partners. And so those who want to help those businesses, we have a place on our website, a downtown recovery effort, where we encourage you, obviously, to patronize. These restaurants are open. Many of the businesses are even though they may be have some broken windows that have been boarded up, they're open for business. We encourage them to be patronized. We also have an outpouring, and it's beautiful in our community of volunteers who want to come out and help beautify, clean up. I mean, a lot of the glass that initially took place had to be cleaned up, and where it was cleaned up by our Department of Public Works for the safety and well-being of volunteers. So but there's still graffiti that is downtown that we need to remove, and so we're working on some coordinated efforts to accept volunteers. So people, if they're interested in that, they can share their name with us on our website on that downtown recovery page. And then also, there are some who said, I want to help with a small business recovery fund. And so a lot of our businesses are small mom and pops. They might be minority-owned. They might be franchises or otherwise. We want to help them reopen. And many of them have an insurance deductible that is much higher than the need to replace a $2,500 pane of glass in front of their store. But think about it. If they've been closed for 10 weeks, they've laid off their staff or furloughed, and now they're ready to start to reopen, and those windows were shattered. Along with that was a lot of disappointment and timing.
And can you give your website so people know where to go to find where they can give to the fund or give their name to be part of the efforts?
Yeah, so our website is downtownindy.org, and then just Downtown Recovery. You'll see there's a link right off of our homepage, the carousel of visuals that go by. One of those links you right to that recovery page, and we welcome that. I think we also have to address and are wanting to address the inequalities that have led to some of these great protests that have emboldened our community, and we welcome comments and suggestions of ways that we can make downtown even a greater place for all. Not, we obviously haven't been hitting our mark. No one has necessarily as we step through the awareness that we can do better. We're listening. We have our black community who is ready to open our minds, and we are listening, and that's where we all are in a better place for the benefit of, again, a downtown conversation, and that's what we're looking forward to having more and more.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bob. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I guess I would simply add is that when we think of downtowns across the country, it is usually that heartbeat. It's where we do gather. Our downtown is no different, and we want to be that leader in speaking out against injustice, speaking out against inequality, and being a convener, a collaborator, and we are listening, we're working, and we will be setting forth a downtown agenda that focuses not just on recovery, but on rebuilding not just the physical spaces that might have been damaged, but rebuilding our community as a chance to reset. That's what you'll be hearing coming from our organization and our leadership as the days and weeks unfold ahead, and we look forward to sharing those plans with everyone.
Thank you for listening, and please join me again next week. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at emetheny, that's EMETHENY, at radio-1.com. Until then, have a great week.